It was a cold Friday evening in November. The small town of Millersville, Pennsylvania, was quiet as usual. Streetlights flickered gently, and the wind rustled dry leaves along the sidewalks. Emily Carter, a bright 16-year-old girl with curly brown hair and a warm smile, had just waved goodbye to her mom. She was headed to babysit the Wilkins 3-year-old son just 5 blocks away. She never arrived. Emily's mother, Susan Carter, called her daughter's phone 3 times around 8:30 p.m. It rang until it went dead. At first, Susan thought maybe Emily had forgotten to text, or her phone battery had died. But when the Wilkins family called at 9 p.m. asking where their sitter was, panic set in. Police were alerted that night. A search began almost immediately. Neighbors joined, flashlights in hand. Search dogs were brought in, and the local news aired Emily's photo. Big hazel eyes, black jacket, pink scarf. For days, then weeks, the town searched every alley, field, and basement. Nothing turned up. No backpack, no phone, no scarf, no Emily. The town was shaken. Emily was well-liked, smart, with no known enemies. She had a clean record, good friends, no boyfriend at the time. The case became cold after 4 months. Rumors spread that she ran away, that someone abducted her, that she was lured by someone online. But no solid clues ever emerged. 2 years later, everything changed. In April, a young couple bought a small abandoned house on Cherrywood Lane. They planned to renovate it and rent it out. While tearing down part of the basement wall, the husband found something strange. Beneath the wooden paneling, behind a layer of old bricks, he saw something carved into the cement. A name. It read, Emily Carter. They called the police immediately. The crime scene team arrived. Pictures were taken, samples were collected, and soon a new detective was assigned. Detective Rachel Monroe, a seasoned investigator with 18 years of experience and a reputation for solving cold cases. She had just transferred back to Pennsylvania from Seattle. She was sharp, methodical, and didn't believe in coincidences. When she saw the name carved behind a wall in an abandoned house just 10 blocks from where Emily had vanished, she knew this wasn't a joke. Someone had been trying to tell a story, or hide one. Rachel immediately reopened the case. First, she interviewed the couple who found the wall. Then, she requested the full file from the original investigation. She drove to the Carter home that same evening. Susan Carter answered the door, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and dread. Mrs. Carter, Rachel said gently, I'm reopening Emily's case, and I believe we're finally going to find out what happened to your daughter. That night, Rachel sat at her desk and opened Emily's old school records, the witness statements, and the timeline of her disappearance. She looked at the photo of the basement wall. Something about the carving was odd. The way the letters slanted, the shaky lines. This wasn't just a hidden name. It was a message. Detective Rachel Monroe returned to the old house on Cherrywood Lane early the next morning. The structure stood lonely on a quiet road, surrounded by tall weeds and rusted fences. The house had been abandoned for almost 6 years, ever since the old owner, Mr. Hal Bryan, passed away. Rumor in town was that no one wanted to buy it because it gave people a strange feeling, like someone was watching. Rachel walked into the basement with a flashlight in hand. The couple who found the wall, Jeff and Laura Myers, met her at the entrance. This is where we found it, Jeff said, pointing to the half-torn brick wall. Rachel examined the carving again. Emily Carter. The letters were uneven, some deeply scratched, others light. It looked rushed, done with something sharp but not strong, maybe a nail or a knife. She took photos from every angle, then reached out to touch the cement. Her fingers brushed something rough, a second line, barely visible beneath the name. She leaned closer, squinting in the dim light. It said, "Help me." She felt a chill run down her back. Rachel turned to Jeff. "Did you touch or move anything down here?" Jeff shook his head. "Number we just stopped and called the police." Rachel pulled out her radio. "This is Detective Monroe. I need forensics and a ground scan unit at 74 Cherrywood Lane. Possible hidden space behind the wall. Stay alert. We might have more than just writing." Back at the police station, Rachel dug into property records. The house had been built in 1972. It had 3 owners. The most recent, Mr. Hal Bryan, was a quiet man. a retired electrician. No criminal record, no family, and no strange reports. But something didn't sit right. Why would a teenage girl's name be hidden in his basement? She looked into the timeline of Emily's disappearance again. Emily left her house at 7:15 p.m. Her route should have taken her along Main Street and Pine Avenue, then to Parkview Road. But Cherrywood Lane wasn't on the way, unless she took a shortcut. Rachel checked the Old Town maps. Sure enough, an alley ran from Pine Avenue straight to Cherrywood Lane, a shortcut teenagers often use to cut through the neighborhood. She highlighted it in red. Rachel drove to Emily's high school next. She spoke to an old teacher, Mrs. Ramirez, who remembered Emily well. "Sweet girl," the teacher said. "Smart, polite. I do remember she once told me she didn't like walking home alone. She said a man in an old truck scared her once near Cherrywood." Rachel's pen froze on her notepad. "Did she say what kind of truck?" "Blue, I think. Rusty. She said it smelled bad whenever it passed by." Back at the station, Rachel had her team run all registered vehicles in the area from 2 years ago, matching that description. One match stood out, registered to Gary Benson, a handyman who lived 1 block away from Cherrywood Lane. Rachel leaned back, eyebrows raised. Gary had been questioned during the original investigation, but only once. He said he was out of town the night Emily disappeared, visiting his brother in Ohio. No one had ever confirmed it. Rachel picked up her phone and dialed her assistant. "Get me Gary Benson's old work logs. I want to know exactly where he was 2 years ago. And check this. Did he ever do electrical work for Hal Bryan?" She ended the call. It was all starting to connect. And soon the wall would give up all its secrets. The forensic team arrived at the Cherrywood Lane house the next morning with ground-penetrating radar and scanning equipment. The house had been declared a potential crime scene. Yellow tape stretched around the property. Curious neighbors stood at a distance, whispering. News of the name in the wall had started to spread. Detective Rachel Monroe watched closely as the radar technician scanned the basement floor and wall. "We're picking up something hollow behind the concrete," the technician said. "Could be a crawl space or a sealed chamber, about 4 feet wide and 6 feet long." Rachel's stomach turned. "Start digging." Within an hour, they removed the bricks carefully and chipped away the cement until they found a wooden panel sealed with rusted nails. Rachel stepped closer as the team gently pried it open. The smell hit first, stale, moldy air with something rotten beneath it. Inside, they saw what looked like a pile of fabric and bones, a human skeleton partially wrapped in a pink scarf. Rachel stepped back, her hand clenched into a fist. She didn't need a lab to tell her who it was. The scarf matched the one Susan Carter had described the night Emily went missing. The remains were collected carefully and sent for DNA confirmation. On a nearby wall inside the chamber, they found more carvings, this time deeper, more frantic. "He said he'd let me go." "Why?" "I want my mom." Rachel closed her eyes and took a breath. She was alive down here, at least for a while. Her voice cracked slightly. At the station later that day, Rachel reviewed the file on Gary Benson again. No wife, no children, lived alone. He worked odd jobs around town. He had access to tools, vans, and keys. The strange part, he had done regular maintenance work for Hal Bryan 5 years ago, including electrical repairs in the basement of the same house. She called up a 2019 police report. There it was, a complaint from a woman who said Gary had followed her home after she hired him for gutter repair. No charges filed. She moved towns a month later. Rachel muttered under her breath, "Why didn't anyone look closer?" Her assistant knocked and came in with a file. "We got Benson's old work logs and credit card statements. You'll want to see this." Rachel flipped through them. On the night Emily disappeared, Gary claimed he was out of town, but his gas receipt showed a fuel purchase at a Millersville station at 7:42 p.m., only minutes after Emily was last seen. He never left town. Rachel stood and grabbed her coat. "Where is he now?" "Still lives in that trailer on Dawson Street. Let's go." That evening, Rachel and 2 officers pulled up to a small, rusted trailer. The porch sagged, and broken bottles lay near the front yard. The blue 1984 Ford pickup was still parked outside. Rachel knocked firmly. "Gary Benson? Millersville PD. We'd like to ask you a few questions." The door opened slowly. A thin, gray-haired man with sunken eyes and trembling hands looked out. "Detective?" he said, forcing a dry smile. "Something wrong?" Rachel's eyes met his, cold, calculating. "We found Emily Carter." Gary blinked once, then twice. Rachel saw it, a twitch in his jaw. His eyes widened just for a moment before he turned away. "Mind if we come in?" Gary didn't answer. He just left the door open. Rachel stepped inside, ready to uncover the darkness he had hidden for years. Detective Rachel Monroe stepped into Gary Benson's trailer. The place was musty and cluttered, dishes piled in the sink, old newspapers scattered across the table, and the faint smell of engine oil mixed with something fouler. Rachel scanned the room quickly. Her eyes caught the faded calendar on the wall. Stuck on November 2023, the same month Emily Carter vanished 2 years ago. "Mr. Benson," she said calmly, "we know you weren't in Ohio the night Emily disappeared." Gary didn't answer. He sat down in a sagging recliner, his hands twitching on the armrests. "We found her remains," Rachel added, "in Hal Bryan's old basement, behind a wall." Gary's eyes flicked up at her, just for a second, then looked away again. "I worked in that house a long time ago. Did wiring jobs," he muttered. "That's all." Rachel pulled a photo from her folder and placed it on the table. It showed the carving on the wall. Emily Carter. Below it, the words, "Help me." She wrote this, Gary. She was alive. Long enough to beg. Gary stared at the photo. He blinked a few times. His lips moved like he was trying to say something, but no sound came out. "You knew her," Rachel pressed. "Did you offer her a ride? Tell her you needed help with something?" Still nothing. Rachel sat across from him. "She took a shortcut that passed right by this trailer. Did she stop here? Did she scream?" Gary's breathing grew louder. Then he whispered, "I didn't mean to. I just needed someone to listen. She looked at me like I was dirt, just like the rest of them." Rachel kept her voice steady. "What happened in that basement?" Gary looked up slowly, like something inside him had broken. "She screamed. I told her to shut up. Just shut up. But she wouldn't stop crying. She tried to run, so I pushed her. She hit her head. After that, I panicked." Rachel felt her stomach drop. Gary leaned forward now, rambling. "I didn't kill her. Not at first. I was going to let her go. I swear I was. But then, she kept screaming, begging, praying. She said her mom was going to find her, that someone would come. And then I knew. I couldn't let her leave. She saw my face." Silence fell between them. The two officers stood frozen behind her. "You kept her in that basement?" Rachel asked. Gary nodded. "She was there for 3 days. I brought food, water, but she stopped talking on the 3rd day. I think she gave up." Rachel swallowed hard. "Did Hal Bryan know?" Gary shook his head slowly. "He never went down there." Old man barely moved from his chair. "I did the work while he napped. He never even noticed I built that wall." Rachel stood up and gave a signal. "Gary Benson, you're under arrest for the kidnapping and murder of Emily Carter." He didn't fight. As the cuffs clicked around his wrists, he said only one thing. "She wrote her name so someone would find her. I couldn't even look at it." Emily Carter was abducted on November 12, 2023, while en route to a babysitting job. Her disappearance remained unsolved until a message carved behind a basement wall led detectives to her remains 2 years later. Suspect Gary Benson confessed to the kidnapping and unintentional killing. He kept the victim hidden in the basement of a house he once worked on. Suspect in custody. DNA results confirmed. Case closed pending court proceedings. Rachel closed her file and exhaled, but something still didn't sit right. Why had no one ever suspected Gary sooner? And was he really working alone? Detective Rachel Monroe sat at her desk long after everyone else had gone home. The office lights were dim, the hum of the vending machine the only sound breaking the silence. The case was technically closed. Gary Benson had confessed, the evidence matched, and the community was breathing a sigh of relief. But Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She opened the photos from the basement again. There, under harsh light, was the carving. Emily Carter. Then the second line, "Help me." Rachel zoomed in. Her eyes locked on something she hadn't noticed before. Just below the Y in Emily, scratched faintly and crookedly into the cement, were a few more letters. Dan, then what looked like a faint I or Y. Danny. Daniel? Danielle? Rachel's eyes narrowed. She picked up her phone and called forensics. "Hey, it's Monroe. I need you to re-examine the wall photo from the basement. Enhance the area beneath Emily's name. I think there might be a second name carved there, and I need to know what it says." 20 minutes later, her phone buzzed with a photo attachment. The enhanced image showed it clearly now. Danielle, faint, shallow, unfinished, but there. Rachel whispered to herself, "Who the hell is Danielle?" She pulled up the missing persons database and typed, "Danielle plus Millersville plus female plus age 10 to 20, then sorted the results by date. One result jumped out. Danielle Hayes, age 15, disappeared 7 years ago. Last seen walking home from the public library on a cloudy October evening. Rachel's heart thudded. She opened the file. Danielle had vanished only 2 blocks from where Emily disappeared. There were no signs of struggle. Her bag was found near a sidewalk bench, but nothing else. Rachel cross-checked Danielle's timeline with Gary Benson's old work records. Sure enough, he was doing roof repairs on the library building the same week Danielle went missing. She picked up the phone again. "Get a search warrant for Gary Benson's trailer. Full sweep, top to bottom, and re-examine the basement on Cherrywood Lane. The area to the left of the hidden chamber. If there's a second wall space, I want it open." By noon the next day, a new team was on site. They began scanning the basement again. One of the detectives called out, "There's another cavity, just behind the opposite wall." Rachel stepped forward as they broke through the plaster. Behind it was a smaller space. Inside, wrapped in a tattered blue hoodie, were bones and a backpack. Faded writing inside the bag read, "D. Hayes." Rachel stood in silence as the room filled with the sound of shovels, scraping, and tools whirring. Gary Benson had lied. Emily wasn't his first victim. Danielle Hayes was. That night, Rachel went back to the interview room where Gary sat in jail, silent, cold. She dropped the photo of Danielle's backpack in front of him. "You didn't tell us everything," she said. He looked at it and laughed, a low, broken sound. "They always believed I was just unlucky," he muttered. "You were the first one to listen to the wall." Rachel stepped back. Her voice was hard now. "There's no one else to hide behind, Gary. That basement is your graveyard now, and I'll make sure they know every name you buried in it." As Rachel left the room, she made a silent promise to herself. She would tear down every wall he'd built, one name at a time. The cold morning air bit into Detective Rachel Monroe's skin as she stood once again in the basement of the old Cherrywood Lane house. Flashlights flickered across the cracked concrete, now stripped bare of secrets. The second hidden cavity had yielded the remains of Danielle Hayes, just as she feared. But Rachel wasn't here to confirm what she already knew. She was here because something still didn't make sense. Why did Gary carve Emily's name, but not Danielle's? Why was Emily left with messages scratched into the wall while Danielle was hidden in silence? Rachel turned to the forensic tech beside her. "What's the age of the second chamber's construction? How long ago was it sealed?" The tech checked his notes. "We estimate it was sealed about 7 to 8 years ago. Concrete shows older wear than the Emily chamber. Definitely earlier." Rachel thought for a moment. "So Emily was held alive, but Danielle was sealed away right after death?" "Looks like it." Rachel nodded, her thoughts racing. She needed more than just theories now. She needed someone who knew Gary Benson before he turned into a ghost. She drove to the Millersville Retirement Center, where Edna Bryan, the widow of Hal Bryan, had recently moved after selling the Cherrywood house. Edna was 78, sharp-minded, and had lived in that house with her husband before his passing. Rachel sat with her in the common room, a gentle breeze brushing the lace curtains. "Mrs. Bryan," she said softly, "do you remember a man named Gary Benson?" Edna looked up from her knitting. "Gary? Of course. He was always around. Quiet man. Helped Hal with the wiring, plumbing, you name it. They used to sit outside sometimes. Hal said he reminded him of their son before he died. Rachel blinked. Your son passed away? Edna nodded sadly. Yes, Tommy. He drowned when he was 10. Hal never really recovered from that. Did Gary ever stay over at your house? Edna thought for a moment. A few times, when the weather was bad. Hal said he had no family. I think Hal pitied him. Rachel leaned forward. Did anything strange ever happen during those years? Anything you didn't report? Edna hesitated. There were times I thought I heard noises in the basement. Late at night, scraping, like something moving. Hal always told me it was rats or the old pipes, but sometimes I wasn't sure. After Danielle Hayes went missing, I asked Hal if he thought Gary had anything to do with it. He got angry, told me to never say that again. Rachel's stomach sank. You think Hal suspected something? Edna's eyes welled with tears. I think he knew, but he was too old, too scared, or maybe he didn't want to believe it. Back at the station, Rachel stared at the wall covered with photos, timelines, and maps. Emily Carter, 2023 Danielle Hayes, 2016, and then it struck her. A third report, filed in 2011, a missing girl from a nearby town. Never solved. Same profile, same age. Name, Alyssa Stone, 14, last seen at a gas station 5 miles from Millersville. Rachel's hands moved fast. She pulled traffic records, checked Gary's work logs. There it was. A receipt showing Gary bought parts from a hardware store the same day Alyssa disappeared. Store was 2 blocks from the gas station. Her phone rang. Detective Monroe, the forensic officer, said, "We've got something else. Behind the far wall of the basement, we found signs of a third cavity deeper in. The radar barely picked it up." Rachel felt her chest tighten. Get that wall open, now. An hour later, she was staring at another hidden chamber. This one smaller, deeper underground. A crude cement box. Inside him, a piece of tattered cloth, a bracelet, and hair. Rachel turned it over gently. Etched into the underside of the box, faint and unfinished, were the letters. A-L-Y. Rachel whispered, Alyssa. Gary Benson wasn't just a killer, he was a serial predator, and Emily's carving had opened the first door. But now Rachel was walking through all of them. The town of Millersville had gone from quiet to shaken. News reports now labeled Gary Benson as a serial predator who had terrorized the area for over a decade, hiding his crimes inside walls, beneath basements, and behind the silence of those too afraid to ask questions. Detective Rachel Monroe stood in the press room at the Millersville Police Department, staring at a wall of names. Alyssa Stone, Danielle Hayes, Emily Carter, 3 girls, 3 lives cut short. She adjusted the microphone and cleared her throat as the cameras rolled. Thanks to evidence recovered from 37 Cherrywood Lane, she began, we have now confirmed that Gary Benson is responsible for the abduction and murder of not 1, but at least 3 young girls over the course of 13 years. The most recent, Emily Carter, led us to uncover what may have been a decade-long pattern of preying on vulnerable girls, using jobs in the community to access homes and locations unnoticed. She paused to catch her breath. Each victim left behind a clue. In Emily's case, it was her name. In Danielle's, her school bag. In Alyssa's, a bracelet with her initials. They were hidden in basements, behind walls, forgotten by time, but they refused to be silenced. The room was silent. Rachel stepped down from the podium and walked toward the evidence room. Inside, she examined the recovered belongings one last time. Emily's pink scarf, Danielle's tattered hoodie, Alyssa's silver bracelet, shaped like a butterfly. 3 innocent symbols of lives taken. She turned to Officer Grant. Where's Gary now? In solitary, Grant said. He hasn't spoken since yesterday, just stares at the wall. Rachel nodded. I want one last word. The prison interview room was cold. Across the table sat Gary Benson, shackled and silent. His eyes were hollow. Rachel slid a photo across the table. Not of a victim, but of his own face. Younger, when he first started working as a handyman. You built yourself into this town like a ghost, she said. Everyone looked the other way. Hal Bryan. Even the families that hired you. You blended in. Gary said nothing. You didn't just kill these girls, she continued. You locked them in places no one thought to look. You carved their silence into the walls. But one of them carved back. Rachel dropped the final photo. Emily's name etched into the concrete. She led us to you. Even in death, she fought to be found. A flicker crossed Gary's face. For a moment, just a moment, it looked like guilt or fear. Rachel stood and looked down at him. You won't bury another name. Ever again. Back in town, the Cherrywood Lane house was being torn down. The city planned to build a memorial garden there. A peaceful space with 3 white stones, each carved with a name. Alyssa Stone, Danielle Hayes, Emily Carter. At the center stood a plaque. For the girls who were hidden, but never forgotten. For the silence that broke the walls. And for the truth that echoed louder than fear. Detective Rachel Monroe watched the dedication quietly, hands in her coat pocket. A little girl played nearby, her mother watching closely. Rachel smiled faintly, knowing that Millersville would never be the same. But maybe now it could begin to heal. The case of Emily Carter was solved, but her message lived on, carved in courage.